Half Minute Hero: The Second Coming is the sequel to Half Minute Hero. It was an underrated classic on the PSP, but its port was lackluster. The main reason for that was that the developers decided to cut out over 50% of the gameplay content and instead stuck to the simple mechanic of the first storyline. Because of that, both the gameplay and the storytelling suffered. A little disclaimer: I cannot do this review without mild spoilers. There won't be story spoilers, but there will be content spoilers. Half Minute Hero: The Second Coming also continues on its original story. The game itself didn't change. You are a hero that is supposed to save the world. In order to do so, you have to stop evil lords, evil empires, evil gods, universes and evil frogs on your long way. All that in half a minute. In order to do so, the so-called Goddess of Time increases your leveling process. It's so fast that grinding only takes a couple of seconds. After you grinded enough and helped all the people on the current stage, you continue to the headquarters of the bad guy and defeat him for whatever he did wrong. Well, that sounds like a horrible lot to do in half a minute. The goddess may also turn back the time for you, which changes the map back into its original state, minus you killing big enemies, important enemies and acquire gear. The story it entertains is very over the top and tries to parody multiple JRPGs at the same time, even going as far as adopting important JRPG tropes just to later throw them in the dustbin and point out how stupid they are. But the most important question is, can Half Minute Hero: The Second Coming fix what has been wrong? I am trying to make it short, so let's start, shall we? There are some things I really did like about the game. Instead of having a list of quests you can choose from, Half Minute Hero: The Second Coming features a world map, and while it has some serious problems, which I will elaborate later, it also features nice dungeons and collectibles. The original soundtrack of a game like this is pretty important, especially because this game actually works a lot with the power of music as both a pseudo-mechanic and an important plot point. If a game developer tries to tie this into their story, the music must be decent, right? And luckily, the music composed for this game fits. The music played during the game pumps you up. The backdraft here is that after a while it gets a little stale, but since important quests and monsters usually have unique soundtracks, you can easily overlook that. The game is obviously paced very fast, both story and gameplay wise, but if you pace your gameplay this fast, can it flow correctly and can it connect without too much of a trouble? And I'm glad to announce that it can. The gameplay flows nicely. While it is true that the pacing is a little off here and there are weird difficulty spikes for no reason during the story, it's doable, and you should never stuck on a mission for too long. Well, okay, there are some you may get stuck on, but let me elaborate this at a further, later point. The Endless mode is fun as well. It feels like a roguelite. The items you can buy at every point in time in that Endless mode are randomized. If you have gold, you can acquire some of the best gear early on, but very bad gear later. The fact that every 10 evil lords the stage is changing is also very nice and keeps it fresh. This game is driven by a single mechanic only, the half minute and rewind mechanic, so it will be fairly easy to screw your level design up. But those developers, they know what they are doing. They were able to invent quite a lot of different stages with unique riddles, some similar to other ones, but there are many unique jewels as well. The level designer is also very potent. It takes some time to get used to it, but it's fun nonetheless. Now, this is a very good looking list, is it not? But, as I mentioned earlier, this game has some insane problems. There are some things in the game that you cannot and should not overlook. First things first, the world map. While I did praise it for its dungeons and collectibles, it isn't well at all. Those two parts I liked are just small things, or something incredible stupid. Namely, the world map is a useless addition. While you can collect some secret metal, everything else done in the last quest or even before that is void. Suddenly, nobody needs help anymore, nobody is there who could give you tips, nobody is there selling you gear except for the gear you didn't pick up. There's no questing done outside the main storyline, and that's a waste. It feels a little bit like a wasted free roam. It's pointless to do that, and you can easily acquire everything else doing missions you simply replay. The by far biggest problem, however, is that you can grind in this world map, and you have to. If you don't grind till a certain point in the late game, you will not be able to finish the missions, because even the easiest mobs will completely screw you over. I also said that both the gameplay and story are paced really fast, but only the story does it well. But how is that? It's pretty simple. While the gameplay is paced well enough till the very late stages of the game, the story isn't. A good story always starts with something to get you dragged into it and wants to stay with you till the very end. This, however, does not happen in this game. But this isn't even the biggest crime it does. The biggest crime is that it all of a sudden starts to ramp up very hard, but then proceeds to take back the slower pace, till at another point it ramps up very hard again, and then proceeds to take the slower pace again. And even it's not its biggest problem. The biggest problem, in my opinion, is that during the whole story you collect a lot of companions, but those companions never get into the spotlight. That being said, not everything in the story is bad. While it's totally over the top, you do start to care about some of the characters, and the end is pretty satisfying. It's a little bit like going to McDonald's. If you're hungry, it will satisfy your hunger, but it won't satisfy your needs. At the end of the day, however, you are not hungry, so at least that is a plus, or is it? They tried to introduce some mechanics to break up the stale gameplay, but there's a problem with that. Most of the times, those mechanics are completely useless and you don't need them. I actually forgot about most of the mechanics I've learned, like classes, and actually realized I played the game just fine without them. The biggest problem with collecting gear is that you don't need to. In Half-Minute Hero 1, you needed to collect wings to swim or fly, or boots to cross over lava. Also, half the gear made you look like a doofus. In Half-Minute Hero The Second Coming, this is not true anymore. You don't need special gear for special occasions, and new gear is usually stronger than the old gear. That being said, some of the gear that makes you look like a doofus but increases your stats significantly still exists, and it's nice to break up the monotony with it. There's one last thing I want to mention. This will not reflect in the final score, but it's worth to know anyway. Basically, the game is a little bit expensive. €20 or your local equivalent for a game that features around 6 to 9 hours of gameplay, but in the end, maybe a little bit of stale gameplay. But does that mean that Half-Minute Hero 2 is just shovelware? No, it doesn't mean that Half-Minute Hero 2 is just shovelware. Half-Minute Hero The Second Coming is a worthy successor of Half-Minute Hero. My final rating for Half-Minute Hero The Second Coming is a 6 out of 10. Now, do not get me wrong, the game isn't bad. It's above average, and it deserves that. It doesn't deserve much more though. The problems this game have, at least in my opinion, are something you shouldn't overlook, ever. But the most redeeming factor is that those 2 or 3 minutes you spend per quest feel like a full-fledged JRPG adventure. Not as a whole game, but a chapter or an act in a game perhaps. This is literally a JRPG for people with very little time to experience one of the colossal epics such as Final Fantasy VI or Chrono Trigger. For people that breathe, bleed and live JRPG, it's still a fantastic comedy, and it's worth the price.